Carl and Brendan here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short, and it's Sometimes Dead is Better. New episode, we're talking about Stephen King adaptations here, and we are looking at, well, it is another short story adaptation. The short story appears in Night Shift, the 1978 collection Night Shift, and it is The Mangler, the 1995 horror film directed by, forgot he directed, so when his name popped up, Toby Hooper, I went, oh, well, that could be good or bad. Oh, wait a minute, because I always forget. I'm like, oh, Toby Hooper, and I think of the great stuff. And then you're like, oh, yeah, but he also done a lot of shit as well. All right, don't know which is going to fall in. It was written by Hooper and Harry Allen Towers, but he was doing it under the pseudonym of Peter Wellback. The actual story, the short story, was written in 1972, though. It did appear in 1978, the collection Night Shift, but it was written in 1972, so this is a really old short story. As always, do you remember that story?
I do. Not from the 1972. I've got Night Shift is where I would have read it many years after the 1978 as well.
Of course,
I do remember it. It is a very short story. But it's different to
I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. Yeah, this is The Mangler. This is a movie I had seen before, and I always remember it as being an extremely out there idea and a movie in general. Rewatching it, I still feel that strongly. There are elements that I really enjoy. We will touch, of course, upon them as we go through the movie. There are elements I really don't. I think mostly the film really has no choice, because it doesn't have much of a story at all, but to go batshit crazy with it and try and fill it in with nonsense. Whether that works or not, I think that's up to you. For me, I think it's a great encapsulation of the 90s, a certain type of horror that was still existing before Scream, 1 year later, would change the landscape and re-obsess everybody with slashers. This was almost one of the last of the dying breed that still had that 80s imagination, but that 90s sheen. Did you know it spawned 2 sequels?
I didn't until doing some research before watching this. I was amazed, to be honest with you. Obviously, I know they're nothing to do with King. There were no Mangler 2s or Reborns or anything like that in terms of story. So I assumed then from it, even though I'm unaware of it, that it had like enough of a cult following, perhaps. You know, that it made it worthwhile. Because otherwise, I can't see why there'd be more, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Same as you. I knew The Mangler Reborn existed because I'd seen it pop up in like a film list when I've been searching for other stuff on a streaming service, and I was like, well, I must get around to watching that. But in doing the research for this and then reading up the synopsis for both and finding out that not only they're obviously completely unrelated to the Stephen King book or the original, they basically have nothing to do with the original either. In fact, aside from Mangler Reborn, which tells a different version of it, the Mangler 2 is something completely fucking different. It shouldn't even have that name. They've not been reviewed in the site, so eventually I'll probably get around to watching them, but it's not high on my list at the moment. Cast, couple of names I'm just going to mention here because these are the important ones, and there are some names you will appreciate. We have Robert Englund as William Bill Gartley, playing an over-the-top cheesy role under some unnecessary prosthetics and physical ailments that I generally can't fully understand why they went to so much effort. It probably wasn't needed and doesn't really add much to the overall story.
No, and just worth mentioning, I suppose, at this point, that he does not exist in the book. So this is a character written to add depth, add more content to the film, really.
Yeah, I think when we hit that point, that specific point at the end where everything kind of gets dropped on you in one big hit, I think that's the perfect point there. And you can explain that difference between what we see here and what actually exists in the book. Elsewhere, we've got Ted Levine as Officer John Hunton. Where do you know Ted Levine from, people? Maybe best known from Silence of the Lambs as Buffalo Bill. Of course, he would be overshadowed in that movie by Hannibal Lecter himself, but he plays an incredible role. If you're maybe more modern, you may recognize him as the voice of Rusty Nail from the first Roadkill Joyride movie. He's the voice of Rusty Nail. Put this way, when you say candy cane, you can't not hear it in his drawling voice, because he has got one of the most unique voices in cinema. It is it's just incredible. I don't know why I'm such a big fan of this dude, because I don't even know a lot of his work. I haven't seen a lot of his work I can remember, but whenever I saw when I saw his name, I was like, oh shit, he's in this. Well, that means at least I'm gonna my ears are gonna be pleased. I do think he overacts in this. I think, well, to be fair, I think everybody overacts. I think it was the direction. I think Toby Hooper was like, listen, you're going to do this over the top. It must be over the top all the way through. But it's fun for it, I guess. A character I forget about, but as a role I really enjoyed in it, is Daniel Matmore as Mark Jackson, who, when he initially pops in the movie, I was like, okay, well, he's just here to be the exposition guy, but ends up playing quite a major role in it. Again, overacting as well, but I ended up really enjoying him.
Yeah, I did as well. I think he's really, really good to watch. I think, like often these things, it's his relationship with John Hutton, who's like, you got the kind of hipster, paranormal believing sort of thing, like with the I don't buy any of this bullshit. I think it's his step brother, isn't it?
That's it.
Brother-in-law.
Yeah, I think you got it there.
Yeah, like so that dynamic between the two of them is really, really fun to watch.
It is. It does have some of the best scenes are when they're together. We have Vanessa Pike as Sherry Oulette. She's in this movie. She is part damsel in distress, but she's also part of an ending that I find daringly offensive to a degree. How bad I think it is. She's fine.
Yeah.
And then we have Jeremy Crutchley, who plays Jay. The character's name is JJJ Pitcherman, but he also plays the mortician. And this person has been put in this incredible old person prosthetics and makeup to the point where he looks like he's a walking corpse. I thought it looked terrible.
Yeah. I mean, don't want to sound like I'm always repeating myself, but another character made for the film.
Right.
It does look terrible. He's a confusing character. At first feeling like coming across extremely creepy and almost like he's going to turn out to be like the villain, yeah. But actually his role in it just fucking just appears, doesn't he? Like suddenly there'll be the flash of a camera, it's like fucking there again. And you're almost like, what is this dude? Like, is this if you didn't know any of this stuff, right, you'd probably expect some sort of unveiling, like he's like a demon powering the Mangler or some shit like that, you know what I mean? Because he comes across like that, and then he kind of just fizzles out of the film like quite sad, and he was actually just a nice lonely old man.
Yeah, his death scene is one of the more weird moments of the film where it's played for emotion, and all I kept thinking was, every time I look at you, you make me feel a little bit sick, but also I had the same feel as you, as like, this dude feels villainous to me, and then it's like, oh no, he just knows a few things, and him and John were friends. Okay.
So, halfway through a game of cards that had never been finished. But yeah,
insane.
It's an odd character.
It is an odd character, but it is an odd movie, and you get that from the very start. So if you don't know, the Mangler is a massive, good God, is a massive, dangerous laundry press owned by Bill Gartley and Gartley's Blue Ribbon Laundry Service, which is one of the most over-top portrayals of an old-school laundry service building warehouse, with the women working in this gigantic machine and the dirt on the walls and the sweat and the screaming foreman. It seems out of time, even for the era the movie's made in. It doesn't even feel like it fits. It looks like something from the 70s, like we're gonna have children up chimneys or something.
Yeah, but the book is from the 70s, so I guess that's the thing, isn't it? So like the machine is, I mean, I'm assuming this machine was like real, like, you know what I mean, because it is fucking like that machine itself is terrifying, even without any demonic shit. I would say that I do actually really enjoy the way that they shoot the footage around the machine, and sort of do like these like long run close-ups all the way down the gears and all that sort of stuff, and it's very gray, isn't it? It's all very gray and darks and blacks, and it does a good job with the camera footage there of actually making what is essentially a piece of machinery into something very threatening even before anything's happened.
You are right. There is an ominous vibe around it and how it's shot. You know, there's a part I'm sure to say where you just can't see like this is a health and safety nightmare. These chains and levers and parts are just exposed. You could literally trip and put your head into them. Well, that's effectively what's going to happen a lot through the movie.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely nailed it there. There is an ominous feel just surrounding a threat that comes from this machine, and that's even before it becomes haunted,
Yeah.
possessed, whatever the word is. And the trouble seems to start when Sherry, who would later, in a weird twist, turn out to be Gartley's niece. For some reason, they dropped this in way later on rather than just at the start. I don't know. She cuts herself in a lever and splashes blood on the Mangler's head. Now, that to me was, oh, there's the starting point. That was some sort of ritual or thing that was supposed to happen. But later again, the movie will confuse itself because at the same time, like some old ice box is being moved and they knock into her and that's how she cuts herself. And sparks and lights and it all goes a bit crazy when the box goes near the Mangler. And the reason why I'm mentioning this now is because later it will turn out that this box was the one that was possessed by a demon, and then it connected to the Mangler, and the Mangler became possessed as well in what is arguably one of the film's most insane moments. But yeah, like all I'm thinking, but do you remember, was that a part of the book? Was the icebox the possessed?
I don't think the icebox was in the book. I mean, I will, when we get near the end, I'll explain what went wrong here. But, you know, to be honest with you, but this is straightforward. Like, you know, there is a lot of straightforward stuff about this story in the book. This is haunted / possessed machinery. You know what I mean? There was so some of the decisions made to try and go right. Well, this is a very short story. You know, we're not talking a novella here. We're talking a handful of pages. To decide that I want to convert this to film, there were bad decisions made. They filled it out to make it a film, which just probably means it wasn't meant to be a film.
Right.
And then weirdly enough, they actually then carried on adding more and more to it and made it a relatively long film.
Yeah.
Which is the crazy thing. So like, not only was it like, it didn't, you could have, I mean, I think I'll probably get it wrong. I think it's like I don't know, close to 2 hours, like not far short of 2 hours. You know, they're considering they're talking like 90s horror and all that, you can get away with an 80-90 minutes.
Yes.
So if you do the book and it only gives you 20 minutes, you've got to fill it out a bit. But yeah, didn't have to fill it out this much. The icebox, pointless, confusing weirdness, to be honest with you, and actually in a way takes some of the threat away from the Mangler, which is actually just a pure innocent little machine.
Yeah, you are not wrong. It derails it. I'd forgotten the sequence later on, the icebox sequence, particularly in the backyard at all, and it fucking derails the movie. But before that, we see Mrs. Frawley, who's like an elderly worker suffering from like heartburn. So she's taking some acids and she ends up spilling them on the moving thread of the Mangler. And she tries to collect them and ends up getting pulled into it and crushed. This is where this film is brilliant. The gore effects, the practical gore effects are incredible. The image of her crushed and folded like a sheet on the floor blew me away. Still holds up in 2023. There are effects in this movie that don't. We'll get to them. But when it comes to the physical, practical effects like this, can't knock it.
No, like they're fucking gross. They are actually gross. It's quite disgusting to watch. And they also proper play on it. You know, they don't just kind of like, oh, we'll give you glimpses. They kind of zoom in and close in on passages of it, drips of blood, plenty of like staring at it straight footage, but also the reactions of the characters around it, like looking and throwing up and all that sort of stuff, all kind of adds to it as well, you know.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. At the end of the film, we'll get a very extended, drawn-out death of a character that is, wow, just what it is. But you're not wrong, because I thought it was really interesting, because obviously this is where John comes into it. He's a police officer, detective, who's now investigating the incident there. Now, he is your bland-ass police character, you know. He's got a bit of a potentially drinking problem. He's moody, he's unfriendly, he's unfeeling, and all that. You know, he's got gruffness about him, but he'll get the job done, that kind of thing. But even he vomits when he sees the body.
Yeah, he gets there and he doesn't react well to it as well, which just I guess kind of adds a bit more to the grossness of it. But I think also just before he gets there, he also has a run in with an icebox, the same icebox, doesn't he?
He does. Which, that bloody
attempts
icebox
to crush
man.
him. But yeah, it's weird. Like, I do find his character position kind of weird, because I think when he gets that, like, he's quite blasé. He doesn't really give a fuck about like what's happening with the people. You know, you have people like outside the laundry coming up to him going, "Oh, help, help, help," and
Covered
all
in
that. And
blood
he's
in
just
it,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, fuck off," basically. And he
Basically,
goes in,
yeah.
yeah, looks at it, and he's like, "Oh shit."
And we should say during a lot of these sequences, we're constantly seeing Bill Gartley, Robert Englund's character, standing like up on a top block sort of area, screaming about getting the girls back to work and all of that. Like I said, he's got this odd makeup job to make him not just look older, but to make him look deformed to a certain degree. And he has some sort of injury that means he has to wear massive leg braces as well. We get this really long sequence where he invites one of the girls up and basically talks to her and coheres her into partnering her up with him and I guess sleeping with him. That goes on forever, that scene.
Yeah, it's a strange scene. There's a strange bit where like she's standing at one end of the walkway and he's standing at the other, and then she's like, "Do you want to come in?" It's just like, fucking hell, what's going on?
Yeah, the scene when he's walking around her as well, and what they've done is they position the camera either on a dolly as well. So as he moves around, the camera's moving. We start to get fucking dizzy with that sequence because it goes on for like a minute or two as well. Yes, indeed. So obviously John starts to investigate. Things kind of progress when he often goes to his brother-in-law, Mark, to talk about the events. And Mark has history in demonology. So he starts to wonder and ask questions and start to link things up, particularly when, and while investigating the icebox, they come and find out that it was delivered to our home. The kid in that home got trapped inside it. And then during a sequence, some sort of entity and spirit breaks out of it. This is crazy because Ted Levine, reaction and behavior to this, and then afterwards just being like, well, that was a bit weird. It's just like, what the fuck what was going on here? And you are right, even without knowing the story, this was clearly all added in.
Yeah, it was it's a completely bonkers scene, right? You know, that you talked about some of the effects where they're sometimes good and sometimes bad. This is bad. The fighting of the icebox, I mean, a part of me appreciated it to watch, right? Because like it's kind of just like this unleash of his anger, and you know, but at the same time, the biggest this to me highlights the biggest issue with this film across the whole piece, which is that this could have been really funny if they weren't taking it so seriously.
Yeah.
You know.
You're not wrong. There is that sense to it that there's a little bit too taken to this much too serious, and you are. And I think because you might not believe that, but I think what we talked about before, when you get to the JJJ Pitcherman death scene, you realize, oh, wait a minute, you actually think we should be sad. Oh, and that's when you realize, oh shit, you're not taking the piss, you're not having a bit of fun, you're actually being serious. Basically, during this as well, he's getting to know Sherry as he feels that Sherry is linked in some way. There is a brilliant scene where him and Mark go to ask her questions, and Mark just desperately wants to ask her questions that might prove his case about the Mangler and the icebox being possessed. He wants to ask if she's a virgin because that's related to it. And John's like, don't you fucking ask her that. Don't do that. And he still, at the end, spits it out, which obviously it goes down as well as you would expect. That dynamic, that's the shit I ended up enjoying the most.
Yeah.
But basically, long story short here, I'm going to quickly throw in exactly what the events are of the movie in regards to the story, because it comes at you in one big hit about 3/4 of the way through and is baffling weird. Gartley and other town elders have been sacrificing their virginal daughters to the machine on their 16th birthdays in exchange for wealth and power. And that is what's been going on. And Gartley's now one is to complete his end of the bargain, as he has to sacrifice Sherry to it. And if you're thinking, wait, what the fuck? Why is that the thing? Why is that so complex? You're not alone there. But also not only that, it throws a massive spanner in the works but I thought the Mangler wasn't possessed at the start.
I think the thing with the cool box and the Mangler is, I think while it appears to be that the cool box was haunted and possessed the Mangler, it's kind of ambivalent. Yes. You could also take that the other way. It is possible that the Mangler possessed the cool box when it touched it and not the other way around. It's possible. but it's not clear. That's the thing. It's like they weren't sure which way to go with it, so we just leave it ambivalent, and you can just kind of go either way then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I ended up deciding in my head that the Mangler was alive all the time, but it wasn't as malevolent or evil. It just wanted to sacrifice at a certain point. But obviously, something had happened where it was now suddenly like, I'm going to eat and chop my way through just about anybody that comes near me. Because you do get certain scenes throughout the movie where people sharing one scene gets close and like it opens up as if it's going to, you know, like a mouth, basically, and elements like that. But once we get through all of that nonsense, we do reach the sort of and that's what you think you're at the end sequence, but you're not quite there, as they do end up exercising the demon. But during this sequence, Gartley's lover, the woman he brought with her, gets killed. The foreman gets killed as well, but Gartley gets killed. And that's the scene we're going to touch upon now, the one we referenced at the start of this video, of the most insane effects, because the folding part of that folds up the sheets, we see that happen to his body step by step in gruesome practical effects. Now, there is a hilarity to it, which is by the time it's got up to like here on his chest, he's still alive apparently, because he's still screaming, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But it is done so vividly and intensely that I kind of just liked it.
Yeah, it's brilliant gore in that scene.
It is. And they all done, you know, everyone's happy and they're like, right, it's brilliantly done. Hunting, though, ends up taking some antacids. And this is where she reveals they belong to Mrs. Frawley. And Mark, remembering something he had read earlier on in a passage, realizes that the key ingredient in antacid is deadly nightshade, which is also called a hand of glory, and was in his occult book, and it will enhance the demon's power, which means the demon machine was accidentally fed the same antacid. I think that there might actually explain why it suddenly becomes so like sentient, is that aspect there. Yes, you can sum that up as the possessed Mangler ate some antacid and then became even more possessed. It's as mad as that. So basically, the demon isn't gone. The exorcism failed, and now it's stronger than ever. It bursts into life properly this time, actually rising up like a beast with cables and all that kind of thing, and we enter CGI territory. And even for 1995, this looks like shit. I get it. There was probably no real way you could do this ending without kind of getting around the CGI and elements like that. But fuck me, if you didn't have the money to do this well, just hide it. Don't put it on screen. Keep it where you just see some flailing cables and noise and stuff like that. Do something to hide it, because every time you see this thing chasing after them, as it's now mobile, like it's got some fucking legs or something, which you never see, it just took to take me out of it. I was like, good God, that's awful.
Yeah, it does look bad. It does.
And sadly, I was really sad about it, Mark gets killed. I was like, oh man, he's like the best character in it, at least my favorite character in it.
Yeah, he'd been really good, and like in the last sort of half hour of the film, he went from being like some sort of like hipster weed smoker to some sort of like high priest who suddenly found all this like chants and was like reading out Latin and going, say all this stuff. It's like, where the fuck did you get all this from? And then he just gets whooped. So like, just makes a mockery of his powers.
Yeah, we should say during this last sequence as well, the amount of noise, wind, things going on around them makes it incredibly fast-paced, at least.
Yeah.
John and Sherry managed to escape down some stairs, but Sherry kind of won in the end, kind of offers her life, but John stops them. But they end up falling through like a giant manhole that falls into the sewer, into like a pool of water, so they're kind of safe. And basically, the machine wants to go after them, but then you kind of get this, I don't know if it's an abrupt ending. I actually had to watch it twice, because like, what actually happened here? Is something just falls from the machine into the water, and then the machine just stops, as if something, I don't know, fell out of it and it died, and that's it. And then it's just like, oh, do you know what happened here?
No, because I understand the confusion of it. It does sort of like end very suddenly and not very clearly. The thing is, like, because again, by this point now, we're outside of the book territory.
Yeah.
That this is whatever they could come up with, and I guess they couldn't. You know, I remember feeling like I mean, I wrote down that I don't really understand the ending. It doesn't do much for me. The whole film was basically a waste of time for Johnny, everything that he did. But
we'll get to that last bit in a minute, but here's a good point for you to reference. So going back slightly to the overarching picture, which is this virginal sacrifices and that element. This is the part that you've said before to me, that this basically none of this exists in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The book, it is very short, right? The book, as far as I get right. Firstly, I guess the caveat to this, okay, like anything, people will take different things from things. So I can only say what I took from the book and what I felt the book was meant to be portraying, which was a metaphor, okay? A cheesy, comical, funny metaphor about industrialization and the lives that were being sacrificed to work in 10, 12 hours a day in a factory. That's what it was meant to be, about the people being ate up by the industrial machine, right? Yeah. Simple, straightforward stuff. Very King, to be honest with you, and short and metaphorical. And also, I guess, it's comical. The book to me read like a comedy horror. Yeah, I don't think Stephen King was genuinely trying to make a Mangler terrifying. He was trying to make the idea of this sort of people mindlessly walking into the machine and their whole lives being swallowed up, and then the cop trying to stop it all, but even he fails. And at the end of the book, which is where the book ends, which is prior to this, the machine pulls itself off from its anchors and runs off into the town, leaving Johnny realizing there's nothing he can do about it. The new age of industrialization is here. And that's kind of it. And actually, I think if you had took that comical cheese approach and gone for a comedy thing, it might have been more of a cult hit. I'm not saying it would have been good, because that's you don't know, do you? That's the thing.
Yeah.
The reality of it is that they weirdly they took it too seriously. They
took it back to that, don't we?
Seriously, yeah. I mean, how can you? You have to look at the context of what we're working with here. You know what I mean? And then they've tried to add elements to it to make it more serious. Let's add a creepy dude in here, a creepy dude in there. Well, let's add, the antacid thing in there to try and give reasoning to things. I mean, think of some of the logic in this film. Like, even for the time, right? If Robert Englund or William Gartley is genuinely feasting wealth and power through this machine, he don't look particularly wealthy or particularly powerful, does he? It's not working.
It's a laundry freaking
he can barely
service.
work. And the things that they kept in from the book, sometimes they then become at odds with the other things, because the book bits were cheesy, fun, political statement more than anything else about why do these poor people have to go and work in factories 12 hours a day and then they come out with nothing. And they kept those bits in the book, which are bits like at the beginning trying to portray keep working. Oh, she's cut her finger, but it doesn't matter. Keep working, get it all turned back on again. That's all stuff that is in the book. Do you know what I mean? But then when you surround it with all this additional stuff to try and make it seriously, really, really serious, you could have kept all the gore, you could have kept all that sort of stuff, absolutely, but also kept it quite cheesy. I think the points where you can justify where it makes the least sense is the Picture Man.
Yeah.
Because, again, in the context of the story, it actually offers very, very little. It doesn't really answer any questions. It doesn't really add anything. And that's just a character added into it. It's very difficult to justify why. And it's the ending, which feels like they didn't really know what to do. King's ending, while probably unsatisfying as a movie it just goes running off into the night and we never hear anything else.
Talking about satisfying is that there is a little bit more at the very, very end, just to add more to the whole thing, which is, and again, that JJ Pritchman comes back into it as John now gets a letter sometime later from him, which basically tells them not to trust anyone in the town missing a body part as they're possessed by the Mangler. And I remember watching this the other last week and being like, wait, what? Where's this going? And then time passes. John has popped to see Sherry, who's still working at the fucking laundry press, apparently. And he's got some flowers. But when he gets there, he sees that not only is the Mangler in full operation, where it was previously, But Sherry is now the one in charge. Also now, for some reason, with a walking stick and seemingly having leg problems, must be related to it. But when she waves at him, and she's barking at the employees like her uncle did as well, or his father, sorry, I think, yeah, father did as well. And she waves to him and reveals that she's missing her ring finger. And like obviously, which is supposed to link into the overall picture. And seeing that, he just walks away, throws the flowers, and drives off. And that there, which is almost like a post-credit scene, is just like, what the f is that?
It made everything a waste of time.
Right, right.
Everything Johnny did was for nothing. You know. So
you could go on what you said, because you did a really brilliantly deep dive there, explanation about the metaphorical thing. I suppose at best you could say, if you ignore all the nonsense surrounding sacrifices and all that, is you could say, look, the industrial machine continues regardless here in regards to how it's back to what it was and she's working on it. But I feel like in the movie, at least, that's such a stretch because they buried it amongst this nonsensical stuff about sacrifices and wealth and power and missing a ring finger and you're possessed by the Mangler and all of that nonsense.
Yeah, and that is all the nonsense. Like, genuinely, the bits that are not in the book are the dad, the reasoning behind it, the virginal sacrifice and lose a finger, that sort of stuff. That's not in the book. The photographer and the extended ending. That's all the padding that was added.
That's a lot of padding.
But also, like, it's the bits that when we watch it that we're all like, you and I are both pointing out and going, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. I guess you're gonna, maybe there's an argument to say that if you had to change it that much, maybe either firstly you didn't need to make it, or secondly you should have just changed the whole thing.
Yeah,
because actually by trying to keep the core there and then padding, it's become a disjointed mess.
Maybe that means one of the sequels is actually quite good. If it's nothing like that, who knows?
Maybe.
Here's the thing.
I feel like this whole thing, right? Like, I mean, when I was looking up the details on the book and looking back at it and everything like that, you know, and I came across like a person who'd written some stuff about the differences between this and the book as well, which helped me to remember them. And they had a quote in there, like from Stephen Brooks, who basically said that when they started making the movie, during the process, they then realized they didn't have enough material. And that to me is a massively telling statement that this was potentially an attempt to cash in on popularity of King, talking 90s here. You know, there's a lot of stuff about, because why on earth did you say buy the rights, cast it, start making it, and then realize you didn't have enough material? Do you not normally read this shit and script it and everything first?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that should be happening before.
So, you know, a little bit of me kind of like thinks like, well, you brought this on yourself, to be honest with you. The thing with it is it's not the worst thing I'll ever watch in my life because it has moments of enjoyment in it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And also I think they had a couple of particularly good actors in there who, I don't know if, I feel like they tried to give something to the role, but I didn't always understand what it was. But they don't feel like people, they feel like caricatures of people.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like Robert Englund's character in particular, at no point does he feel like any sort of human I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
if he'd
like, he's not real
at the end.
Yeah, he's not real. Like, he could never be real.
Yeah. And we know like he's flamboyant and we know he throws things into roles and all that sort of stuff. But
great actor.
It's still just, yeah, absolutely. You know, but it just doesn't, I don't know, just doesn't quite work. So, you know, my argument for this is why is it, why make it? Like, you know, I have nothing for it. Joe, this would be perfect for the exact metaphor that I was given in a sort of half an hour Tales from the Crypt sort of styled episode. You know what I mean? Where it ran that sequence of that.
You're not wrong. Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side, something like that would have been perfect. You actually nailed that there. I agree with everything you're saying there, but I will say to people that if you've never seen this, I do actually reckon you should check it out for all the reasons we've explained about the crazy moments, the stuff that is quite enjoyable, how nonsensical it is, and an overacting main set of cast playing characters that simply just feel unreal. It is a unique slice of mid-90s horror and certainly one of the more odd adaptations of King's work, you know, that we've done to date. That's the Mangler. You got any thoughts on it? You know what to do. Let us know in the comments.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?